our world has been progressing at an extraordinary pace.
But at what cost?
Inequalities persist in our societies.
Inequities widen.
Carbon emissions keep rising.
Raising temperatures, risking our homes and livelihoods.
Wouldn't it be amazing if we can go back to zero?
A world where people and planet can find a balance, with plenty of opportunities and resources.
And everyone can thrive.
Where the total carbon we emit is naturally offset by the environment.
A world that's worth leaving the children.
We believe it's possible.
We've always worked towards advancing Asia.
Now, we are stepping up our responsibility.
We are moving towards a net zero carbon position.
By changing the way we live.
As individuals.
As a company.
As residents of this planet.
So together, we can play our part
in easing our impact on this world.
This is our promise.
It begins with me.
And me.
And me.
And me.
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 Axiata is advancing to zero, our commitment to sustainability. It begins with us.
Yeah, hi, Shanli. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the final episode of Top in Tech in virtual format. I'm so excited because of that, and because we're going to move on to physical events come January or February, and not so much because we apparently have finally solved who's going to be the Prime Minister, carousel. So we'll not get into that, but Shanli, I'll let you start by sharing some opening remarks here.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shanli. I'm a partner with Scale Up Malaysia. We're an accelerator and we invest in startups and work with them to help them grow their businesses. I'm very excited about today's episode, actually, because I would like to learn more from the panelists today about 5G, and especially because I work with so many startups and businesses, what they can do to capitalize on the opportunities that are available and what they need to do to prepare their businesses for 5G. So over to you, Karam.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm as excited as well. Although I'm a tech journalist, digital transformation, we already know has existed, right, for a long time. And then we had digital acceleration during the pandemic era. And now, at least in Malaysia, right, we have finally moved into the 5G era. And we're going to start seeing how 5G affects and impacts and accelerates, I guess, not decelerate, digital transformation for all of you already on your journey, or those of you who are about to start, and suddenly you say, hey, why don't we leverage on 5G as the infrastructure? So we've got three very, very interesting, knowledgeable experts to share their thoughts with us. And before I start, I want to thank all of you, right, for the privilege of your time for being sharing the screen with us for the next 1 hour. And those of you who have followed previous episodes before, one unique thing we do on this show is that we give priority to your questions. It's not me and the panelists talking among ourselves, asking each other questions. Those of you who've RSVP'd and submitted your question, we've taken questions from there. And those of you who will start asking questions now, you be assured the panelists are looking at your questions as you ask them, and they'll pick the ones that they want to answer, all right? And if you have a question addressed to a particular panelist, please put your name there. This question is for so-and-so, and hopefully they will take your questions, all right? And we'll endeavor to take as many questions as we can. And with that, we're going to start first by having each of them share 3 minutes their top of mind thinking, right, about this topic. We're going to start with Khairil Anwar, who's from IDC. Now, some of you may be confused as to why Khairil has a full head of hair, whereas the promotional material that went out was actually about his colleague, right, Dharmaraj. But Dharmaraj is not well. But Khairil is a fantastic step in. Thank you so much for last minute coming in, because Khairil is very familiar with the 5G space also, because he's the head of IDC for in Southeast Asia for the telco space. So who better than to ask his thoughts on? So Khairil, the next 3 minutes are yours for your perspectives here.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Khairil here, Head of Telco Research, IDC ASEAN. So a bit about IDC, we do provide market insights basically, and also advisory services regarding information technology, telecommunications, consumer technology markets. And we also produce market forecasts, observe market trends, and also in terms of understanding the end user behavior, and also reveal any opportunities or implications to a tech buyer and also tech provider. Okay. So, about the topics, right? I think that 5G is really a key drivers for digital acceleration and also digital transformation, especially when a lot of enterprises actually is transforming from what you call it, pivoting their business and also digitally transform towards now having a digital first strategy as part of their business framework and also business strategy and goals as well. And in terms of, what is going to be the enterprise role in assuring their business readiness and also capitalizing the opportunities, we are saying that connectivity as a fundamental or foundation or also become a common denominator in how people think, applications, and also process interacts. Today, what we see is that connectivity is more important than ever, keeping enterprise consumers connected, informed, safe, and also productive. And especially is during actually uncertainty situation. And also we are also facing, headwinds in the future as well. Yeah. So that's the kind of things that we need to be ready in terms of resilient and also having an agile kind of business strategy. And also the importance of what we call connectedness. Organization must actually address unevenness in the connectivity across different environments and also location. And remote working, employees, consumers, they are increasingly looking into more digital experience supported by ubiquitous, reliable, and also robust connectivity. And
Anything else? No?
No, that's it.
Okay, good, thanks. Khairil's got a lot to say, but we told him, hey, just leave time for everyone else. So thank you so much, Khairil. Okay, now let's get Dr. Gopi Kurup on screen with me, Kurup, and to share his perspectives here. And I think, Gopi, congratulations to your team, right, for creating that superb video. Very uplifting, I thought, so well done there.
Thanks, Karam. Good evening, everyone. My name is Gopi. I run the enterprise business for Axiata Group out of Kuala Lumpur. I think I have a couple of slides if they come up on the screen, and I'll just talk through them. Just maybe as a quick introduction of the group, I think most people are familiar with Axiata as a sort of a brand based out here, headquartered out in Kuala Lumpur. If we can click to the next one, please. But what is interesting from the group perspective, and we'll share a bit more of that in detail, in particular to the Malaysian market and more broadly in all of our operating markets, is that we're well prepared for the 5G era coming on board, and we're particularly sort of excited from an enterprise perspective. I think a lot of the Axiata companies are known as a consumer-first brand, but 5G is really going to start driving the enterprise business for Axiata Group particularly, but in general through all of the industries which we are looking at. As a quick note, we're operating as telcos in 6 regions, but we are also beyond that in different sectors of the market. In preparation for the new tech coming on board, we've also sort of reorganized or restructured ourselves, as in there is a structured infrastructure company called E.co, which you'd be familiar with, as well as additional business in Boost and ADA. They're both financial driven as well as advertising on the digital side. I think a good testament to some of those logos which you see as investors and partners within the group also indicates external parties like Sumitomo Mitsui, SoftBank, who invested into our business. because they see the potential of that growth of 5G within the region in itself. Next, please. Just going one layer down, and then what does that really mean from an enterprise perspective? So we exist currently in 6 markets. We're very bullish about these markets because they're, good growth areas. Markets like Indonesia also has got a lot of attention, not just regionally, but also globally. Large spend in digital transformation, both from an industry perspective, from an ICT perspective, going on in all of those regions. The young growing population, so ready to sort of adapt and adopt all of these new tech. Next, please. Something which is maybe a little less known in preparation again to really sort of capitalize on all of the business growth, the maturity of the region, as well as the tech coming on board. We've also invested in a number of ICT-related and 5G-related companies, looking at sort of smart services, growing from our strength of connectivity deeper into the businesses within the region itself. Some examples of that, BridgeNet might be a familiar name locally, which I saw from last year. Similarly, areas around HyperNet, which is the largest indoor managed connectivity provider in Indonesia, which was bought by Axiata some time ago. So these are sort of the building blocks which we've put together, both inorganically by the acquisition, as well as sort of upskilling our own personnel for 5G smart services. Next, please. And you can click through that. As you can see, the companies which we've sort of acquired brings in good capability into the group. And we start off again based on our strength on sort of managed connectivity, and that's where really we see the first phase of growth to be with the rollout of 5G networks, and then focusing particularly on smart services, which is a broad term, but we focus on specific verticals where we've seen sort of industries ready to adopt tech. Examples around Sri Lanka, dialogue has been through transportation and logistics. Here in Malaysia and Indonesia has been through oil and gas, mining, energy-based sectors are sort of motivated to try and both drive down their cost as well as try and increase their sort of efficiencies with the new tech which are on board. Security is another big area for us, and I'll spend a bit of time. I think there were 1 or 2 questions from the audience in itself, and we'll spend a bit of time talking about that too. Effectively, how IT security changes to again be closer to network and smart services security. Next, please. A quick snapshot, and again, we'll provide a bit more details for specific examples, but it's just a quick snapshot of type of clients or logos in region, which are starting to adopt technology, and then what does that mean for their business per se. And then, we'll spend some time discussing that in a bit too. And I think that's the end of the slides.
Okay. A lot of interesting clients, man, and different use cases. So I got to make sure I keep you tight because you'll have lots to share with them. But also, I didn't know you have over 1,000 headcount now, Axiata Enterprise. And then, of course, through the acquisitions you made, that has beefed up your headcount. But that's a lot of in-house expertise, man, which I didn't realize you had to that extent. So cool. Okay, thank you, Dr. Gopi. Let's now bring on Adrian Lim from EY. And for those of you who don't know, EY has also been playing an instrumental role in Malaysia's 5G, game plan, especially at the early planning stage together with DNB. But Adrian, your immediate thoughts on this topic? 3 minutes for you.
Thanks, Karamjit. I think really for me, 5G is really a game changer to particularly accelerate digital transformation. Now, if you think about it, right, ultimately 5G is still an underlying infrastructure, right? I mean, it's still connectivity. But really, if you look the biggest difference between 4G versus 5G, what does 5G offer above and beyond 4G, right? The first part is really that you get higher throughput rate. Now, with higher throughput rate, then you basically unlock the art of possibility, right? What can you do with a higher bandwidth, right? You're then now looking into the applications of metaverse, of real-time AI, VR, and so forth and so on. That's the first part. The second part, 5G enables low latency and ultra reliable communication network. Again, what does that really mean, right? What are the interesting use cases that enables? One example would be autonomous driving, right? Second, and when we talk about autonomous driving, it's not only limited to like your Ubers and so forth, right? But even on the industrial part, right? You're talking about smart robots, smart tractors, and really industrial use cases, right? And then the third portion really, from an efficiency perspective, right? 5G is designed to basically connect multiple IoT devices on a per square kilometer basis at a much higher density compared to 4G or even your NB-IoT. So really, 5G for me is a game changer because it sets the right foundation that's secured and unified to basically allow, I guess, enterprises, companies, government to really drive digital transformation. So for me, that's why it's so exciting.
Okay, man. Cool, man. Thanks. You packed in a lot there, man. Game changer is always, as a journalist, I always become cynical when somebody says game changer. You hear it so many times. So let's see during this discussion if we manage to convince people or not, right? Okay, now, thank you very much. So let's bring on the other two panelists to share the screen with me. And for those of you who do know, who have followed Top in Tech, I only asked one question to the panelists, which comes from me, and I asked them the same question to get their different perspectives on this. And it's about a topic that has brought us here today, right? How, I guess, I'm going to start with Khairil because Khairil kickstarted us sharing also. How, Khairil, in your opinion, right, do you feel that digital transformation is going to be different in this 5G era? And of course, the other two will be taking the same question. So Gopi, stand by to answer the same question. Khairil, you first. Oh, you're on mute, sorry. Hopefully that's the last time I get to say that also, right?
All right. Sorry. All right, that's a very good question because, I think last year when we IDC conduct survey into the consumer and also enterprise. Now, the weird thing is that the consumer portion, they are really excited about 5G, even though they don't know what is actually the benefits of 5G, what is going to be the experience, but they are wondering and they are waiting. So end up more than 80% of Malaysians actually are willing to migrate from the existing 4G to the 5G when the coverage is ready.
Wow, 80%. Interesting.
And
I didn't know that.
Maybe I can give some example of what is the purpose of they are waiting for the 5G network, right? Most probably it's for video streaming, new experience, maybe with a higher resolution of 8K resolution, I guess.
Okay, wow.
And another part is actually on the VR and AR portion on video gaming. So that's on the consumer portion.
Yep.
Now, enterprise, this is a good data that I would like to share. When we ask enterprise, like, I'd say that 51% of ASEAN organization is actually aware of the benefit of 5G, but actually they don't know what is going to be the killer use cases for
of course.
So from here is that going back to your question, like, so it's actually 5G is going to, like Adrian already mentioned, it's a game changer. So with the benefits, with the improvement in terms of speed, bandwidth, it actually can create more business use cases, which actually they did not thought about it before, right? So I think this is more about wait and see situation, right? So if let's say it's happening to a certain verticals or industry, then it will be, everyone is going to follow into that similar direction or even start to realize the potential of 5G. So another part is that on the 5G in terms of the future of connectedness, right?
Okay.
Right. When I say connectedness means that we are connecting between process, people, things. So the core portion of it is actually the data, how the data is actually traveling or motion across these stakeholders, and how you can actually produce a more better business outcome when you say using data for business continuity, for business resiliency, or having a data as a real-time insights. So 5G is actually can be the enabler if you are looking into that perspective.
Okay, cool. Thanks a lot. So enabler, game changer. Okay, now Gopi, Mr. Use Case, man. I know of the 100 plus clients you have. Of course, not all are adopting 5G yet, but so share your key perspectives of how you think it's going to be different, right, in this 5G era.
Yeah, thanks, Karam. And I think for us, it is really just been sort of client driven. So, and I'll give specific examples of that as opposed to a technology push. It's been more business ask. So specific examples of that, Vale is the sort of largest mining company globally.
Okay.
But they've got a big logistics center in the region and about 100 odd trucks which move around, moving coal. So their main ask around that has been based on ESG needs, occupational health and safety needs. So they need things like their drivers to be compliant to, standards which they've implemented. The problem around that is that they haven't been able to sort of monitor it. And if you can't monitor it, then, you can't sort of measure it, you can't improve it. So that's been the sort of driving, factor to why they wanted that change. And so they approached us and said, they wanted to roll out the 5G networks. But what we came back with them and saying, it's not just really about the networks, but it's about the devices in your trucks. How can you then start measuring those items? And I think that's what's coming together, because in the early stage of 5G, the networks are sort of ready in sort of proof of concepts. But the actual, devices on the ground were not, either they were not cheap enough, they were not poor enough to do that. And what we really sort of dealt with them is to sort of understand, what is it that they want as a business outcome, and then start working backwards. So, it was more a question from a business impact perspective as opposed to a tech saying 5G is a solution for it. But what really that sort of enabled from a tech perspective, yes, devices were sort of cheaper, you could install it quick, and 5G really sort of gave you better network coverage into areas which were much smaller pockets of the actual trucks, where they were monitoring it, so you could deploy it, not as a sort of a blanket across their entire, operations which they had, but for pockets which needed that type of a coverage. So it was both cost effective for us, and it sort of met the business needs for, what Vale wanted to do. So the examples of this, which has sort of happened in region for plenty of use cases around that.
Okay, wow, interesting. Huh? All right, good. So thanks a lot. That really helps crystallize for readers, right? Readers, sorry. For viewers out there, at least one example of how amazing, right? Mining, you can't get more brick and mortar and how they are leveraging. Well done to them, man. Okay, Adrian, you want to take this now?
Yeah, I think, again, I just echo what Khairil and Gopi said, right? 5G is an enabler, right? Now, again, use cases or the so-called killer app has not been defined. But really, if you look at the global trends, what they've used is that they've combined 5G with other technologies such as cloud, right? Such as edge computing, artificial intelligence, right? By bringing all these new technologies together, that's where you can so-called create the killer apps. But again, just to echo what Khairil and Gopi said, globally, the killer apps for now, for 5G, it really comes into two different areas. One is really on the enterprise side. It's all about cost efficiency or cost optimization, right? That's basically using, for example, factories in China. By using 5G-enabled video cameras, you could do visual inspection, right? And what visual inspection really means is that you have a 5G-enabled video camera that can take high-resolution video images, send it to the cloud to do the image processing or the artificial intelligence processing to identify defects. And that really is an example where you drive automation to, again, improve your productivity and reduce your costs or your reliance, or I guess, on, human labor, right? And again, with 4G, with Wi-Fi, you could, with 4G, you couldn't because of the bandwidth limitation. Yeah. But you could potentially do it with Wi-Fi. But again, the cost of Wi-Fi vis-a-vis the cost of 5G proved to be much more cost-effective compared to Wi-Fi or alternative technologies. So there are very specific use cases that will help drive the digital transformation in the 5G era, right? Another good example, really, and again, I was reading through this, right? Again, there was an article published in Malaysia, I think like 3-4 years ago, pre-pandemic. We lose about 10 to 20 billion a year due to traffic jam.
Wow.
Right? Yeah, I'm not sure if you've seen the article, but again, from a productivity loss, 10 billion ringgit a year because of traffic jam. Now, imagine if you have 5G coverage, right? Imagine then you start deploying, smart cameras, which again, we have started in pockets. But imagine you do that innovation at scale, right? You do your smart traffic management and so forth and so on. And that really will drive a massive difference to Malaysia through the use of smart cities enabled by 5G. So again, Karam, very, very interesting. And that's why I say it is still going to be a game changer.
Absolutely. Wow. Okay, cool. Great. Thanks, man. Okay, I hope you're going to be giving us out t-shirts that says 5G game changer. Okay, Adrian Lim. Okay, let me now move on to a question that many of you have already asked when you RSVP for this event. And I'll start with back to you now, Khairil. And that's a question you wanted to take from a student, right, Sui? So I don't know whether, I think she's probably a master's level student. And what changes would it bring to the technology industry? Interesting, huh? Once 5G has been implemented. So how would you take this, Khairil?
All right, thank you. So the way we see that the previous 4G and how they actually implement is that we are seeing the industry, the system integrators, the software apps developer, equipment providers are all working together with operators, and then they can commercialize the 5G, commercialize the 4G. But now we are seeing that the difference in terms of the industry has changed, where the system integrators now actually have the opportunity to go and build the 5G use cases, right? And also there will be a part where cloud service provider also are eyeing into the 5G field as well. And they are working together with, network, what I call equipment provider like Cisco and all that.
Okay.
So, and then they work together and they can produce 5G use cases. So in what I'm trying to say is that every industry player within the ecosystem now can actually go direct and produce a 5G use cases and also accelerate a 5G in terms of digital transformation initiative. And that's going to be the future potential, I would say. And the commercial 5G connectivity, which usually originated by the telco providers or operators, now we are saying that it's not going to be the same way anymore. So moving forward, that if you see the potential of 5G within a certain verticals like healthcare, manufacturing, and so on, so there will be more ecosystem players can be, develop a 5G use cases and also work together with the telco services or communication service providers to achieve the use cases.
Okay.
So that would be the technology from an industry perspective.
All right, cool, interesting. Thank you very much. Now, let's move on to Dr. Gopi, right? So I get the question that I want to ask you is actually asked by a colleague of Adrian's. I don't know whether Adrian knows her or not, because, EY is a large organization, from Narasimhan, but this is about what would be the cybersecurity challenge, right, in adopting 5G, and how are businesses, getting themselves ready, right, for the security part of this journey. So, Dr. Gopi?
No, it's a very interesting and sort of relevant question, because we spend quite a lot of time internally speaking about that too. If you step back and sort of look at where the industry spend has been on cybersecurity, the largest spenders in town are always banks and telcos. They're the main buyers for that. But we foresee that that's going to completely change with the 5G rollout. Yes, the traditional sort of ICT security and management of endpoints, so PCs and things will remain. But what will end up happening is that there will be more compute points or devices, or even possibilities to where people could break into your network, gets deeper and deeper into your premises, as well as your business. Taking the examples of having sensors on either trains or, cranes in ports or so, is good for you to be able to get data back, be able to control that. Now, they'll all be connected around, but from a security lens, they also then become points of threats and possibility to break into. So if you've got a silicon footprint of a 5-cent coin, you also not only need to compute, but you also need to be able to secure it. So how much security is required, how do you power it, how do you connect to it, opens up a whole new dimension around security. The next wave around that is probably going to be around, the analytics and the ability to then, predict where threats are going to be, what is likely going to break. So we're very excited about that area of security too. Not an easy problem to solve, but to start thinking of very early.
Okay, good. Thanks, Dr. Gopi. So now let's move on to Adrian. Okay. Now, Adrian, I bet money that you decided to take this question because your favorite word is there. All right. And this is from Shah Jerome Ambrose, who's a director in an IT consulting company. So he's asking, is 5G going to be a game changer, right, in the consumption of application services? And would it be limited to urban areas? So that's an interesting second part of the question I like.
Okay. So, okay. Well, no, I think it's interesting because, not so much because of the word, but the reality of it is that, again, yes, because if you look at how we interact today, right? Ultimately, when we interact with application services, it's still through our mobile devices.
Yeah.
Still very static, right? But if you look at the future trend, right? People talk about the metaverse. And in fact, Meta themselves, even though it could be a bit self-serving, say that by 2030, right, it's a 3 trillion GDP uplift because of the metaverse. Even if you think about it, even if 50% of that is true, right, it really does drive significant GDP uplift to any country, right? But that is on what we call, I guess, an active interaction, right? You have to put on your headset, and so forth and so on. But more importantly, there will also be passive interaction, or how we interact with application services, where basically you have frictionless experience. So example of frictionless experience, like Amazon retail shop, right? You go in, you pick up the stuff, you walk out, right? That's a very basic example. But again, when you combine 5G, video analytics, AR, VR, AI, ultimately what you start realizing, either through the sensors that you wear on your body, either through video analytics, right? That's how you're going to consume application services in the future. And again, we are such at the beginning stage of the journey. So it's really quite exciting to see what we can do, right? Again, simple example. Today I log in Maybank to you through my app, right? But in the future, I could be having a conversation with my agent through the metaverse, right? I could authenticate through video analytics, right? That it basically says, okay, Karamjit, blink your eyes twice, turn left, turn right, up, down. Okay, Karamjit, how would I serve you today? So the interaction itself will be changing as 5G becomes more dominant, all right? Now, the second part of the questions, if you look at what DNB has publicly announced, right? DNB has publicly announced that by 2024, Malaysia will have 80% coverage of populated area.
Yep.
Right? And that will include dense urban, suburban, and rural. So the short answer is that it will not be limited to urban areas, but rather it will cover 80% of populated areas. And that's a significant chunk of where you can drive innovation and where the rakyat can benefit. So absolutely, the way we interact will change and the coverage will be there.
Okay, cool. Great, man. Excellent. Thanks so much. So now let's move on to a question that Khairil wants to take now. Back to Khairil, right? So this comes from, you mentioned DNB, right? So this comes from a senior principal at DNB, Siva Ruben. And the question is, right, how is the agenda of securing 5G networks critical for 5G digital transformation? So this is a tough question.
Look, thank you, Henry. Yes, I agree with you. It's a very tough question. It's not only about 5G,
Okay.
Just try to give us back a bit.
Okay.
When it comes to security, right, it actually triggered when we all are locked down and we need to work remotely, right? So everyone is worrying about accessing organizations' data, confidential, and so on. So that is where we started to actually more concerned about data security, more concerned about network security, and so on. So everything about security start to like, everyone's talking about security. So network security as a whole itself is already a challenge for organization to safeguard and also right? So even you talk about 5G, the same thing. You talk about cloud, migrations to a cloud, migration about your migrating your core application, for example, towards cloud, also raise a concern where whether I want to go for public cloud, whether I want to go to private cloud, how to move forward, multiple cloud, hybrid cloud, and so on. So everything raise a concern, and the challenges come from the security concern as well. So come back to the 5G network, right? So before that, I just want to share one stat, right? When it comes to network, we did a survey and we asked enterprises from Southeast Asian organizations 53% actually mentioned about network security is the topmost concern for them.
More than half. Okay.
Yeah, so that's number one challenges for them. And how are we going to move forward towards 5G? And you need to understand about how the vendors, what I call the standardization organization like 3GPP, how they design the 5G is actually different from 4G. Because 5G, when they started to design it, it's like a DevOps kind of process. They also consider the development security ops as well when it comes to designing 5G. I just give an example of that SecOps kind of methodology when they start to design something application, right? So security is part of the consideration before they want to design, and they also need to consider various type of use cases also that will be involved in IoT, for example, as a 5G as is going to be the main connectivity for the IoT as well. So the 3GPP release 15, release 16 is already there for enterprise to refer in terms of, it talks about network slicing features. It talks about authentication, also authorizations. It talks about private network security features as well. So what I'm trying to say that with more 5G deployment, with more sensors that you put on things, and you're connecting data in motion as well. So for me, sensors is just a dumb devices that don't know how to protect themselves. So endpoint security is a pretty big challenge when it comes to 5G and IoT incorporation environment. So perhaps I would say 5G is actually well prepared to cater the security measures and also to protect when it comes more mature, I guess, in the next release, I think it will be better in terms of security measures. That's my take on that.
Okay, hopefully, man. Yeah, we already, if you follow cybersecurity, it's very scary, right? Every 2 days or 3 days, somewhere in the world, there's a scary breach that has happened, right? And companies are scrambling to decide whether to pay or try to, to deal with it in some other way. So glad to hear that 5G will bring a higher level of security, maybe embedded into the protocols, right, and the network itself. But let's move on to Dr. Gopi now. And the question you want to take is from Hafizuddin, right, Sabi, who's in financial services, and he's asking how 5G can be implemented, adopted into organization and replacing their traditional LAN.
Yeah, again, another interesting question because, one of the limitations which we've had with previous sort of generations of wireless has been that, right? And maybe only on this call, maybe only Karam and I would go that far back where it was the first or second generation of mobile where, coverage almost like as a land grab, right? So who got there first was able to provide coverage in malls, in offices also. And we've got past that stage where, it's almost ubiquitous with 3G, 4G type of networks. But what's really going to come up is that 5G, as we just spoke about in terms of things like network slicing, allows you to use those frequencies with particular quality of service. So this is an opportunity to be able to provide LAN-like services within the premises. Now, whether that's a traditional office premise, it's a mall, but more importantly, in sort of industry premises, right? So whether that's a factory floor, whether it's a port, you're able to provide, wired-like quality of service using 5G. And we went back to the basic principles of 5G. It was really sort of designed for, short, distant, high burst type of traffic. And that is really what is sort of required for the business. It isn't really sort of designed, or the principles of design weren't for, better video throughputs or things which you can get, but that wasn't the sort of design principles around the networks in itself. And I think those 2 or 3 sort of related questions around, how would we get coverage? What would the design look like? Can you reuse the infrastructure for 4G? I mean, I won't dwell into that because that's the, realm and happy place for a lot of network engineers. But trust that, that they've got that down to a T to how to design that for coverage purposes. I'll just finally say that, the rollout isn't likely going to be like what we've seen in the previous generations, again, where it was for a consumer-based, blanket coverage. You'd see some of that maybe in urban areas, in more developed areas. But what is more likely to happen is pockets of either private networks or, particular coverages which are specific for those industries. Again, specific example of that would be that, if there's a port transformation exercise going on, let's say the Chittagong port in Dhaka, doesn't mean that all sectors in Dhaka have to get 5G coverage from the, get-go. The industrial use case is confined in a particular area. So they would start with that first, depending on, the customer uptake with that. And it would naturally start to grow because you then find that, the trucks which are moving out of those ports require the coverage. So where are they going to, type of areas? So it's more likely to be designed in the network coverage as opposed to, blanket build across the nation. And then one day everyone says, okay, let's turn the switch and everyone is 5G ready.
Yep.
To be that.
Okay. Just again, right? Just so much going on in this space, and companies have a lot to think about also, right? How they want to move forward and benefit, right, from this new technology infrastructure that's out there. So let's move on to Adrian now, and and I really like this question that is taken from Jackson Koo, and this is right. And if you put on your cynical hat, right, as a journalist, you do need to ask this question. Although we're hearing from all three of you now that it's game changer, it's more reliable, it's robust. Hey, the metaverse virtual reality cannot operate, without having this 5G, layer out there. So Jackson is asking, do we really need 5G, right, in current use cases, or why not just invest further in 4G coverage and increase its reliability also? Wouldn't that be the cheaper and wiser approach? So thank you, Adrian, for taking this question. So let's hear your take, right?
Okay. I almost wanted to give a very consultant answer, which say it depends.
Please don't.
Yeah, but it's true, right? I think Dr. Gopi has mentioned correctly, right? It really depends on the use case. Again, if you use, for example, right, if your use case is really passive, non-real-time monitoring.
Okay.
Right? Let's give a very simple example, right? All I want to do for security reason, I just want to record at 2K resolution, at 720 DPI resolution, as a preventive measure, right? 4G is more than sufficient, right? But then if you were a large enterprise, for example, if you were Petronas, for example, right? You say, hey, I just want to do remote monitoring, right? I want a machine to tell me to really deep dive to see the operating parameters, to see the visual or even the thermal images of my pipeline, so forth and so on. 4G will not allow you to do that, right? So again, absolutely, right? So again, the question is absolutely correct. In the current use case, there are use cases where 4G is good enough, right? But then the second part of the question, cheaper and wiser, right? Now, if you think about it, and that's why we say digital transformation. If you look at the use cases or what companies or enterprises need to transform, they need to transform from reactive to predictive to proactive, right? I cannot survive on 720 DPI cameras. I cannot survive on, a huge amount of talent or headcount, and therefore I will need to transform. And if I need to transform, 4G will not be able to sustain new use cases. Right? I'll give you another very simple example, and this happens a lot in Japan.
Oh, okay.
In Japan, it's an aging society, right? Now, when it becomes an aging society, there's a lot of trapped knowledge in the older generation, right? In terms of your engineers, your experts, and so forth and so on. And these experts and so forth and so on are no longer willing or unable to go to the field to do the physical inspection, right? Now, of course, with 4G, you could, do remote inspection, but you think about the quality and the experience vis-a-vis 5G, right? By having 5G, again, you can capture or you can have a centralized expert pool that can support the younger generation in the field, right? So now if you think about it, your field ops maintenance, you are enabling new capabilities, productivity enabled by 5G. That is a step-up improvement from 4G, right? But again, you don't invest 5G for the sake of 5G, back to Dr. Gopi's point.
Okay, don't invest in 5G for the sake of 5G. All right, it's fine. Good. So that's maybe a cautionary, note, right, for everyone out there. And for other consultants also who may think, hey, this is a good way to sell clients, right? Maybe FOMO, fear of missing out. Hey, you got to get in early. So, all right, we'll see how that plays out, right? Still so early days, literally not even taking baby steps yet. But let's move on now to the final set of questions, and then hopefully you can see some questions coming in already, and hopefully our panelists will take some of your questions. But so this question is one that both Khairil and Dr. Gopi want to take, and I'll let Khairil take first digs at this. And this is from the ICT, Honman, who's ICT manager at Yayasan Hasana. Very interesting. So how do you assure the stability and quality of 5G connection since it transmits data over shorter distances than 4G, right? Because obviously the cell range, right, sites are smaller, and you've got this term called femtocells, right? So there's so many cells. You look up on a traffic light, you already see, yeah, and street light also. So how, Khairil, would you take this question? Then after that, Dr. Gopi, you can jump in and fill in any gaps that maybe Khairil has left.
Okay, sure. Right. In terms of assuring stability and quality, it's actually many factors that are contributing towards the network quality and stability. So when you talk about the difference between 4G and 5G, is actually on the spectrum that they use for respective generation. So you need to understand 5G has, according to 3GPP standardization, they say 3 different spectrum range, right? We have a low spectrum, mid spectrum, and so millimeter wave, high spectrum. So what we are deploying now in Malaysia by the DNB is actually using the middle wave, 3.5, and also the low one, 700 megahertz.
Okay.
So if you are using the low one, I think it's for urban area, which is you can cover larger, wider coverage area. But in terms of bandwidth, it can't actually achieve as much as the higher frequency band spectrum. So moving forward, it's actually across all global standard when it comes to roll out the connectivity. So you need to cover larger portion, and then you go into the dense area, smaller and smaller. We are talking about micro cells. So in terms of ensuring the stability and quality, adding more micro cells will be the next good step.
Correct.
For telcos.
Density. Yep.
Density, micro cells using millimeter wave spectrum, the high spectrum, which is can cater more bigger bandwidth, higher throughputs, and so on. Another part, you don't forget, you are talking about wireless only. How about the backhaul? How about the front haul? So strengthening the backhaul connectivity, which is the fiber, right? So one hook wireless and then go to fiber. So these will actually strengthening the coverage and the stability and quality of the network itself. And number 3, in terms of the in-building coverage. So all these 3 factors, I think you'll be more than that, but I think this is the most important one to ensure.
Okay, that's fine. Good. Thanks for keeping it tight. Okay, Dr. Kubi, you want to jump in and add anything here?
Maybe from 2 different perspectives.
Sure, please do.
I think quite a lot of the questions, or the motivation of the question is probably based on the fact of 3G, 4G rollouts, where there are of course pockets of areas where coverage is poor, and that's just the reality of the industry and the business. But the second part of that, to why 5G would help solve, I'm not going to say that it's going to solve it 100% or all of the time, but why it's going to be better is for the fact that the technology with 5G really just squeezes out a lot more throughput out of the same spectrum, right? So the limitations around 4G and why you couldn't deploy that or deploy the cells across all of the areas, because you had limited amount of frequencies to deploy. So 5G sort of helps shift that, because you can then get quite a lot more from the spectrum that you have. And the second is that it also works at a much higher frequency. And what that really means is that there is a lot more bandwidth available for usage to do it. The third area around that is that, think of that most of the use cases, let's say a large portion of the use cases are not sort of for consumer experience. You will still get that with 4G, 5G networks. Bearing in mind, 5G doesn't mean that the 4G networks are not going to be around. They will coexist, just as what we've seen on the 3G, 4G type of networks. But a lot of the use cases would be for devices, sensors. And the sensors don't have, user experience per se. All they do is get the data across in the timely manner. And then, of course, also sort of the underlying pin around that is, the areas around network design, software which support network design, network engineers, have, of course, matured over the last 30, 40, 50 years of deployment. So they're not sort of starting from zero thinking, 5G is completely new. How do I start designing networks for it? Right? I mean, so there's a inherent knowledge base of how to do that. And as they start to deploy in sort of pockets of industry or enterprise centric, we'd have to trust their capability to be able to solve those problems to do that. So I foresee that it will be less of an issue. I wouldn't say it's zero issues, of course, because you're dealing with frequencies which, bounce off buildings get, distorted by metal parts and then the moving things. So you can't really sort of guarantee it 100%. But again, network deployment and network engineers try their best to try and solve those issues.
Okay, all right, interesting. Thanks. So let's move on now. I think we're down to it. Let me check, do a timestamp. Okay. We're down to probably one last set of questions. Then I'll ask you for your key takeaways for the audience. But I guess, Adrian, if I can, I think there was a question that came in, right, from a Nelson Yong and asking how can consultants help, I guess, companies with a baby step of collecting basic data first. I guess when you already have a 5G environment, right, or is that is that also a low-hanging fruit where you try to help companies to once they decided that 5G can be useful for them, what would be the first step, right, for them to take? And sometimes some people call it a low-hanging fruit or easy win or quick win, right? Convince everyone else that this is the way to go. And he's asking how could you assist in calling it a baby step. So how do you take that? How would you take that?
Well, so I think, and Dr. Gopi would also have, I guess, I will also be able to share really whether it's consultants, whether it's telcos or telcos as they transform, right? It's really no different, right? How consultants or how ecosystem partners, hyperscalers, we always start with a basic point, which is really what's your business pain point, right?
Okay.
If I solve this business pain point, is it a revenue uplift or is it a cost reduction, right? Now, once you understand that potential, then only you go into the technology selection. Back to the point, right? I've always said that 5G is not the answer to everything.
Yeah, correct.
Right? So once you know the business problem, the size of the problem, the benefit, either revenue uplift or a cost reduction, what are my options? And based on those options, how fast can I execute it? And I think that's where coming from an outside-in perspective as a consultant, right, will bring that framework, that rigor, and I guess that case study, right, from globally to help companies to take that baby step, right? And again, once you identify the potential use case, the pilot, then, work with, the Axiatas of the world and the telcos of the world to do small pilots. And again, if it works, you then scale it out. So it's not different from any of your digital transformation methodology, right? You start small, and then once you really find that there's value, you innovate at scale, right? And then you deploy at speed.
Yeah, I think I like that, right? Start with the pain point of the client, right? And not some of them lured by saying, hey, we got to go into this 5G, right? Especially if it's a listed company here, got to quickly send out the press release, say we're using EY or Axiata, right? That we're going to do the 5G enable. that would be not a good thing.
Dr. Gopi also wanted to say something.
Yeah, okay, Gopi, go ahead, jump in there.
What I was just going to add was that I think more than consultants being on board, the term I would use is that it's more a consultative process between the client and the technology provider. Examples of that, Dialog is our operating arm in Sri Lanka, and one of the key projects which they provided is to connect railway lines. When the Lankan government decided to build up new infrastructure, all they asked for is just connectivity. So they just wanted consumers to be connected through the journey. But when Dialog went up and said is that, look, there are new tech which comes on board, which can also connect all of your carriages of the trains. You can now start getting things back for your operational, improvements. Would you like to look at that? And so that sort of pricked up their ears. And so, they then realized it wasn't just for their consumers, they could use it for their operations. And that iterative process just went, back and forth to be able to expose how far tech has got, what are the devices which are available, how can you utilize it, what are the software components which, you can then develop to be able to monitor that. And then they slowly started to deploy that out in phases. So it wasn't, again, with a big pitch or a big thing to say 5G is going to, solve world problems. It was really an iterative process or a consultative process between the client and the technology company to do that.
Okay, good. Excellent. Yeah, thanks so much. Great. So look, we are out of time already. I got to wrap up and ask you each like your key takeaways. But before that, Sean Tan asked a really good question that would be in a lot of minds. And Sean is from PwC saying, what's going to happen if telcos refuse to sign the agreement with DNB? Of course, refuse me to take the 5G capacity from DNB and then offer it to the market. And especially when he says one huge telco, of course, it means Maxis. And, Maxis, ironically, and although that's not the ambit of our digital transformation, but just to answer that quickly, Maxis were all ready and eager to be the first telco to launch 5G. Yeah? Back in 2019, they were ready to launch in 2020 in a big way. But of course, two cataclysmic events happened in 2020. Right? One on the political front, and then and one on the health, public health issue fund. So that came and scuppered their plans, and then. Now it does seem like they're going to be they will be the last ones to come in, but I assure you they will be coming in and offering their customers that, not to worry. Right? They've got their own priorities and corporate governance issue to take care of. I'll leave that aside now. Let's move on to the final key takeaway for each of you, right? And I will start with Khairil, your key takeaway for the audience today, and then with Dr. Gopi and Adrian, and then Shanli will come join us for rapid closing remarks.
All right, thank you. So I think as a nation, right, private and public partnership is actually important, crucial. So our government has a vision, right, already with the Jendela and My Digital initiative, which also can be complemented by vendors and vendors to create more robust ecosystem. And the most important is open collaboration, creating the environment, more use cases, explore different use cases, bolster innovation, drive the deployment and adoption of 5G solutions. So just welcome 5G, expedite on acquisition, and also expand the coverage to the nation.
Okay, cool, great. Gopi?
Good. Thank you for all of the questions. I think that the audience are quite knowledgeable in the tech and then, sort of covered broad areas. Just as maybe closing remarks would be just, I think we broadly covered security. And so, in all of the deployments also, this should really come to the forefront of considerations. Two is that I think that the adoption within industry is not going to be driven by the CIO or CTO who are the traditional tech buyers, but more from business perspective. I think we covered the things of, what are the themes which are being fulfilled with 5G, whether it's ESG concerns, safety concerns, productivity concerns. So it is driven more by the business needs within those industries. And of course, IT and tech will play the supporting role in deciding the technology. But it needs to be quite clear in each of the industries to which is the biggest pain point or the biggest gain which you want to be able to address. I think sort of spending some time understanding that, having open conversations with telcos and techcos, making it again a consultative or an iterative process will help that, as opposed to saying, all of the tech would be mature, it would be boxed up, and I just need to go and implement it within my operations. Just as a reminder, all of this is still very new ground.
Yeah.
So it is not that there is a boxed solution from, Canada, which you can come and implement here. It is unlikely to happen.
True. Okay, good. Thank you so much. Thank you all three panelists for your time. We're going to bring on Shanli for closing remarks, but I see Mary Ang has asked a question, and hopefully one of the panelists will take it during the 1 minute of the closing, the closing video that we play. And also for all of you out there, just remember that we have 1 week left to go for you to submit your company's entry, right, for the DNA Malaysia Kini Top in Tech Innovation Award, various categories there. So please go and have a look and submit if you think your company has done a superb job in adapting to digital and being innovative, right? And you want the whole country to know about it, right? With that now, let's bring on Shanli for her closing remarks.
Hello. Thank you very much to the panelists and Karam. I really enjoyed that. Actually, in my head, I was seeing all kinds of things when they were describing the different things that can happen with 5G, real-time AR, VR, robots flying around, things really futuristic. But one of the things that stood out to me was really what Khairil said about 51% of organizations don't really know what the killer app is going to be. So I think for me, it was, yes, this is going to be a huge game changer, but we really need to think about actual use cases, right? Things that may not necessarily be so sexy, but how can you optimize cost efficiency? How can you optimize productivity? What can you do with 5G on a smaller, more specific use case perspective before going into the futuristic world? I also thought it was very nice to see actual use cases that the panelists shared with us, things like the mining company using 5G in controlling and monitoring their logistics network, 100 trucks. And I think those are very key to businesses and organizations to really start thinking about how are they going to use 5G for their businesses. The other thing that I wanted to share, which I thought was a good takeaway, was with 5G and with increasing connectivity and increasing compute points, I think everybody needs to take into consideration security. And the other key point which I got was also, what can we do in terms of existing devices and how can these catch up with 5G? You know, trying to just deploy 5G into a business which cannot cope because the existing devices just can't adopt it is something that businesses really need to take into consideration. So that was, really, really good for me. I think my key point to take away from the whole session was really, I think it was from Adrian, who said, don't invest in 5G for the sake of 5G.
No FOMO. This is not the space for FOMO. All right, good. So thank you so much, Shanli, and thank you again, our three panelists, and thank you all of you who stayed with us to listen to the end, right, for the privilege of your time. And we look forward to seeing you next year when we do it physical and you can shake hands and, and we can throw questions at each other, right? So have a good, remaining of the week, and, we'll see you again soon.
Our world has been progressing at an extraordinary pace.
But at what cost?
Inequalities persist in our societies.
Inequities widen.
Carbon emissions keep rising.
Raising temperatures, risking our homes and livelihoods.
Wouldn't it be amazing if we can go back to zero?
A world where people and planet can find a balance, with plenty of opportunities and resources.
And everyone can thrive.
Where the total carbon we emit is naturally offset by the environment.
A world that's worth leaving the children.
We believe it's possible.
We've always worked towards advancing Asia.
Now, we are stepping up our responsibility.
We are moving towards a net zero carbon position.
By changing the way we live.
As individuals.
As a company.
As residents of this planet.
So together, we can play our part
in easing our impact on this world.
This is our promise. It begins with me.
And me.
And me.
And me.
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 Axiata is advancing to zero. Our commitment to sustainability, it begins with us.